In Albion, there are many different factions that the player encounters as he explores the world. These are usually people who were there before the player and his companions arrived in Albion. Right now in Albion, the player can encounter the Royal faction, which is actually a series of sub-factions, the Royal Military, the Royal Wagoners, and the Royal Artisans.
There's the Old Inhabitants, an ancient faction known as the Keepers. They consist of all kinds of old races who have always been there. But there's also more sinister players here. There's the Cult of Morgana. They want to revive an ancient enchantress and conquer the world for themselves.
And you can encounter the Undead, the survivors of the Old War, a faction that is comprised of a lot of dead knights who still try to fight a war that they lost thousands of years ago. So as part of the mission system, you finally get the chance to interact with all these factions in Albion.
Missions work a little bit like quests in other games, in the sense that there's a faction representative who will approach you with a task, which could be like transporting goods, crafting certain things, or in fact combat missions, right? Eliminating certain enemies. But then on the other hand, missions in Albion are not like quests. We want the whole thing to tie in with the open world idea. So one important thing to understand is that factions have a limited amount of silver they can spend on missions. And that means you're competing for the missions with all the other players in the world. If all the players work for the same faction, that faction will in fact run out of money. And you have to work for a different faction if you still want to do missions. So missions are not an unlimited source of silver. That is very, very important to keep the game economy intact.
As you do more jobs for a faction, you gain more standing with them. Basically, they start to like you more because you work for them. You may also lose this standing again if you do work for other factions that doesn't further the original faction's goals. So as you gain more standing with a faction, they will offer you more important jobs and more challenging jobs. When you complete a mission, you'll usually get paid in silver. But on top of that, you also get a faction-specific reward. And these are usually tokens from the faction. These tokens you can exchange with the faction for a very specific gear.
So like the Keepers are usually very aggressive. So you can expect the Keeper gear to support a very, very aggressive play style, while the gear you get from the Undead is of course very dark and sinister.
Basically, every faction has their own very specific reward that you can unlock by becoming aligned with them and working for them.